Hank Jae finally decides it's time to reveal his grand secret to Corporal Lee Se-min. Without much preamble, he simply gestures for him to follow. Corporal Lee, equal parts curious and wary, trails behind him through the dense, shadowy forest. Soon, Hank Jae stops in front of a particularly large tree, motioning for Corporal Lee to climb. Without questioning it, they both ascend, their movements practiced and silent. Higher and higher they go, until finally they settle onto a thick branch, overlooking the expanse below. From this vantage point, Hank Jae points toward the North Korean army base, now clearly visible beneath the cover of night. However, it isn't the standard military activity that has his attention. It's something far more sinister. In a low, measured voice, he tells Corporal Lee about the base's dark secret. At its core lies a gateway. Not just any gateway, but one that leads directly to hell. Corporal Lee blinks, momentarily convinced he must have misheard. "I'm sorry, what?" he asks, just to make sure his ears aren't playing tricks on him. Hank Jae, unfazed, continues. The gateway is no ordinary phenomenon. Located at the back of the base, it is nothing more than a gaping void in the earth, its depth unknowable. A fence surrounds it, but nothing can contain the horrific energy spilling from within. A thick, oppressive darkness radiates from the pit, accompanied by an aura so malevolent that standing near it makes one's skin crawl. As if the mere thought of the gateway is too much to bear sober, Hank Jae reaches into his robe and retrieves a flask. Without a word, he takes a long, slow swig. Corporal Lee watches with deep, unmasked envy. The way Hank Jae drinks makes it seem like the alcohol is the only thing keeping him from spiraling into madness. "Can I?" "No." Hank Jae shuts down Corporal Lee's request before he even finishes the sentence. "You're not ready." Corporal Lee frowns, but lets it go. Hank Jae then drops another bombshell. The North Korean army has been using the gateway's dark energy for human experiments. They're harnessing demonic power, twisting it for their own purposes. The very thought sends a shudder down Corporal Lee's spine, but it also sparks something else: curiosity. With their clandestine conversation coming to an end, they decide to head back. As they make their way through the forest, Hank Jae shares another unsettling truth. The South Korean army is entirely oblivious to the gateway's existence, yet they claim ownership over it. At this, Hank Jae suddenly stops walking. He turns to Corporal Lee, his eyes narrowing, his voice dropping to an eerie whisper. "That gateway isn't just some anomaly. It's an evil force that should have never been allowed to exist." A cold shiver runs through Corporal Lee's body. Before he can respond, an overwhelming sense of dread washes over him. It feels as if someone is standing right behind them. They snap their heads forward and find themselves face to face with a North Korean soldier. Not just any soldier. This man exudes the same nightmarish aura as the gateway itself. His name is Park Min-cheol, and his presence alone is enough to make Corporal Lee's breath hitch. Park Min-cheol steps closer, his gaze locking onto Hank Jae before shifting to Corporal Lee. There's a twisted amusement in his eyes as he sizes up the unfamiliar face. His grip tightens around the dagger in his hand, making Corporal Lee's palms slick with sweat. "You have a new friend, Hank Jae?" Park Min-cheol asks, his voice dripping with amusement. Hank Jae, ever the enigma, remains calm. He greets Park Min-cheol with a casual nod and a feigned air of politeness. However, Park Min-cheol isn't here for pleasantries. He felt Hank Jae's presence and decided to pay him a visit. Hank Jae, not one to waste time, challenges him to a fight. Corporal Lee nearly chokes. Has this old man lost his mind? Park Min-cheol looks like he could snap him in half without breaking a sweat. Yet before he can voice his concerns, Park Min-cheol smirks and suggests that he fight Corporal Lee instead. Corporal Lee vehemently shakes his head. Hank J, unimpressed, scolds him for his cowardice. "I may be old, but I'm not that old," he says, cracking his knuckles. In a flash, Park Min-cheol moves to attack. Hank J reacts instantly, shoving Corporal Lee out of the way with such force that he is sent flying through the air. As he soars, Corporal Lee has just enough time to start praying for Hank J's survival. He lands with a thud, somehow in one piece. Before he can gather himself, he hears a deep, guttural growl. Slowly, he lifts his head, and there, staring back at him, is a creature unlike any he has ever seen. A Yorg. It's massive, tiger-like, and jet black, its fur streaked with deep, bleeding wounds. Red eyes gleam ominously as it bares its enormous fangs. Corporal Lee instinctively reaches for his sword, only to realize he left it back at the cabin. Fantastic. Thinking quickly, he does the only thing he can. He gently pats the beast's head. To his immense relief, the Yorg actually calms down. The creature then begins to follow him like an oversized, bloodthirsty puppy. Eventually, they reach a safer area where Corporal Lee tends to his new companion. As he contemplates his bizarre situation, his mind drifts to his past, back when his biggest concerns were passing his awakening test and finishing his military service in one piece. His moment of reflection is cut short when the Yorg suddenly attacks him. Before Corporal Lee can react, Hank J appears and swiftly kills the beast. As the dust settles, Hank J delivers a grim lesson. Demons may submit temporarily, but their instincts will always overpower their will. Corporal Lee, shaken, runs from the scene. When he finally stops, he catches sight of his own reflection in a nearby pool of water. His face is tense, pale, his eyes filled with uncertainty. Hank J joins him, his presence oddly reassuring. Seeing Hank J alive and well, Corporal Lee feels a wave of relief wash over him. "So, Park Min-cheol wasn't as tough as he looked?" he quips. Without warning, Hank J smacks him across the face with a stick. "It was a draw," Hank J corrects, scowling. Corporal Lee rubs his cheek, stunned. Then, Hank J does something unexpected. He calls him by his name. Not Corporal Lee, not some dismissive title. Just his name. Corporal Lee stares. "You've never done that before." Ignoring his reaction, Hank J pulls out his flask and hands it over. Then, in a rare moment of vulnerability, he makes a request. "Use your discharge time for me." Corporal Lee furrows his brows. "What do you mean?" Hank J doesn't answer immediately, but his expression is clear. Something bigger is coming. Time has passed since Corporal Lee Saman first met Hank J, and in that time, he has transformed. Once an ordinary soldier, he is now sharper, stronger, both mentally and physically. His training has been brutal, and today, his skills are being tested against monstrous foes. Right now, standing before him is a beast from the Neutral Demonic Beast series, number 24, Mandrako. This eerie creature feeds not by hunting, but by summoning other beasts with its unholy cries, letting them tear each other apart and then absorbing their blood as nourishment. It's a grotesque survival method, but Corporal Lee isn't here to judge. He's here to capture it. Hidden behind a thick tree, he watches as the beasts, already weakened by Mandrako's cries, thrash about in a frenzy. Then, seeing his moment, he strikes. Like a phantom in the night, Corporal Lee emerges from the shadows, his sword flashing under the moonlight. In mere moments, the battlefield is painted red, monstrous bodies littering the ground. Yet, despite the carnage, he remains unscathed. His only concern, his tattered shirt. "Great," he mutters, inspecting the rip. "This was my only pair." Meanwhile, the Mandrakos, Small, trembling creatures watch in horror. Their eyes bulge as they process what just happened. When Corporal Lee shifts his gaze toward them, their fear multiplies. He sighs dramatically before leaping into the air and landing right beside a tiny, wailing tree, the source of Mandrako's eerie cries. The logical move? Destroy it. What he does instead? He plunges his sword into the dirt right next to it, letting the blade hum with restrained power. "Shut up!" he warns the tree, his voice carrying the weight of unspoken threats. Silence falls. The Mandrakos, now realizing it's their turn, attempt to flee. Too late. Corporal Lee, with his sharp senses, already has them locked in his sights. "Stop!" he commands, his voice thunderous. The Mandrakos freeze mid-step. He gestures for them to come forward. They have no choice but to obey. Not long after, Corporal Lee and his unwilling captives arrive at Hank J's hideout. There, the old man is lounging on the ground, stirring a pot over a makeshift fire, looking every bit like someone with not a care in the world. "You're late," Hank J calls lazily, not even bothering to look up. "I just left a little while ago," Corporal Lee retorts, rolling his eyes. Hank J smirks. "Slowpoke?" Corporal Lee mutters under his breath, something about Hank J's temper getting worse with age. Hank J's eyes narrow. "What was that?" "Nothing." Corporal Lee feigns innocence. "You're definitely mishearing things." With their usual banter out of the way, they get to business. Hank J asks if Corporal Lee found the Mandrakos. Standing tall, Corporal Lee grins. Mission accomplished. Hank J immediately stands, eager. "And? How was it?" Corporal Lee blinks, unsure of what Hank J wants him to say. His lack of response earns him a sharp scolding. "You idiot! Do you ever think?" Hank J fumes. Corporal Lee, ever the innocent fool, clasps his hands together. "Master, please explain in detail. I'm just a simple man." Hank J pinches the bridge of his nose, exhaling slowly. "You and I are not in the military, and yet, talking to you feels like trying to discipline the world's dumbest recruit." Accepting defeat, he lets it go. They enjoy their meal, kaud meat, rich with celestial energy. Corporal Lee eyes the Mandrakos as they watch in quiet horror. "You think they know?" he muses, chewing thoughtfully. Hank J shrugs. Even the smallest creatures can sense celestial energy. Once the meal is over, it's back to training. Corporal Lee, sword in hand, stands before Hank J, who, arms folded behind his back, hasn't even bothered to pick up a weapon. Confidence? Arrogance? It's hard to tell. The fight begins. Corporal Lee lunges, sword flashing. Hank J dodges with the ease of someone swatting away a fly. This pattern continues. Strike, dodge, strike, dodge. Corporal Lee attacks relentlessly, but Hank J merely sidesteps, hands still tied behind him. Finally, Hank J takes the offensive. With a series of well-placed punches, he weakens Corporal Lee, though not enough to knock him out. Just as Corporal Lee regains his footing, Hank J backflips out of reach, signaling the match's end. A year of this. A year of hunting demonic beasts, refining his martial skills, pushing himself beyond limits he never imagined. And all for one reason: sealing the gates of hell. That was Hank J's condition for training him. "Not bad," Hank J admits. "You improve fast." Corporal Lee grins. "All thanks to you, Master." Hank J, lost in thought, studies him carefully. Corporal Lee has grown. He's nearly at the level of the black bark. But time is running out. If the gateway isn't sealed, the world will plunge into chaos. Sensing the tension, Corporal Lee calls out, "What's wrong?" Hank J exhales, crossing his arms. 15 days. That's all we have." Corporal Lee's eyes widen. Time really flew, huh? Hank J scoffs. At the rate you eat, we'll blink and it'll be over. Corporal Lee laughs, but deep down he knows Hank J isn't joking. 15 days pass. Hank J sleeps soundly, but Corporal Lee lies awake, restless. He imagines his future: fame, interviews, adoring fans, an autobiography, endorsements. He'll be a legend. Then he remembers Park Min-cheol and scowls. That bastard. Morning arrives. They prepare for war. Corporal Lee dons his gear, sword strapped tight. Hank J, meanwhile, casually ties his hair into a bun. "You look like a guru," Corporal Lee quips. Hank J ignores him and hands him a small button. "Press it." "Are we taking a car into the deep forest?" Corporal Lee wonders aloud, pressing it. Silence. Then, boom! An explosion erupts behind him. Corporal Lee spins around, eyes wide. "What did I just press?" Hank J, utterly unfazed, explains, "When facing the final battle, you eliminate any retreat options." Corporal Lee stares at him, horrified. "You could have warned me." With nothing left behind them, only one path remains: forward. Without hesitation, they march toward their final fight, toward destiny, toward the very gates of hell itself. After a grueling trek through the shadows, Hank J and Corporal Lee Semin finally reach the North Korean army base. Crouched behind a massive boulder, they survey the heavily fortified compound. The enemy's defenses are tighter than ever, and according to Hank J, the People's Army is deep into research on mass-producing raiders using the twisted power of evil aura. Park Min-cheol, once an elite raider, has transcended humanity altogether through their gruesome biological experiments. As Corporal Lee studies the ominous, swirling darkness of the gate to hell, Hank J makes his move. Focusing his energy, he activates his camouflage skill, vanishing from sight. "Follow me," he orders. Corporal Lee, thoroughly confused, blinks at the empty space where Hank J once stood. "Follow you? Follow what?" "Just do as I say," Hank J replies, his voice disembodied and wholly unhelpful. "Would it kill you to explain the plan?" Corporal Lee grumbles, crossing his arms. "Or is keeping secrets just your favorite hobby?" His complaints fall on deaf ears. Hank J, true to form, offers no answers, only an order to shut up and follow. Meanwhile, two on-duty North Korean soldiers are engaged in their own deep intellectual discussion. A gossip session. One eagerly tells the other that soon it'll be their turn for experimentation. The second soldier lights up at the prospect, eager to become as powerful as Park Min-cheol. Never mind the part where they could end up as failed, twisted abominations. This stroke of luck gives Hank J and Corporal Lee the opportunity they need. They scale the wall of the base with practiced ease. As they reach the top, Corporal Lee wastes no time. He wraps his legs around the first soldier's neck and squeezes until the man slumps unconscious. The second guard, immediately panicking, lets out a scream. "Intrude!" Hank J silences him with a swift strike. Within moments, both soldiers are incapacitated, tied together like gift-wrapped packages. "Let's move," Hank J instructs, already pressing forward. Inside the base, a wild celebration is underway. The storage room is packed with North Korean soldiers, eating, drinking, and laughing. Completely immersed in their revelry, they fail to notice two outsiders slipping through their midst. Corporal Lee, unable to suppress his curiosity, nudges Hank J. "What's all this about?" "Heard last night that today marks the birth of a new leader," Hank J explains. "They're celebrating." "Wait." Corporal Lee furrows his brow. "A North Korean leader is helping South Korean locals?" Hank J merely smirks. "Stranger things have happened." Reaching the rooftop, they gain a full view of the compound. Corporal Lee rummages through a small box and hands Hank J 6 tiny trees, seemingly insignificant, until Hank J infuses them with power. The trees tremble, their eerie wails splitting the air. The effect is immediate. Every soldier in the base jolts in alarm, hands flying to weapons. Sirens blare. Tower lights whirl. Chaos erupts. Corporal Lee watches the mayhem unfold. And now? Hank J doesn't answer. Instead, he clamps a hand over Corporal Lee's mouth, silencing him before his babbling draws unwanted attention. Below, soldiers scurry in disarray, murmurs spreading of an impending monster horde. Those previously unaware are now fully panicked, pushing the situation into full-blown hysteria. Hank J releases Corporal Lee with a quiet promise. You'll see soon enough. Just then, a North Korean soldier rounds the corner and spots them. His eyes widen in horror. "Intruders!" he yells, scrambling for his radio. Hank J and Corporal Lee immediately leap from the roof, landing hard on the ground. But the alarm has been sounded. 2 intruders spotted near the western border. Surround them immediately. The soldiers mobilize, prepared to hunt the invaders. But before they can act, an ominous noise rumbles through the air. The comrade who raised the alarm turns, his breath hitching as his radio slips from trembling fingers. The gate to hell has opened. A monstrous hand emerges first, its claws glinting under the searchlights. Then, towering over the entire base, the beast fully reveals itself. One glowing red eye pierces through the night, sitting grotesquely in the center of its forehead. Curved horns stretch high, jagged and sharp. More creatures slither and crawl from the abyss, reptilian abominations, winged nightmares, horrors in forms indescribable. The North Korean soldiers, once so concerned about intruders, now redirect all efforts toward survival. Gunfire erupts, but the bullets barely scratch the creatures. Desperation thickens the air. Someone barks the inevitable command, "Call Colonel Park Min-cheol." Hank J and Corporal Lee, meanwhile, race toward the gate. "You're a damn genius," Corporal Lee admits between breaths. "All this was your plan?" Hank J grins. "Of course." Just as they reach the edge of the abyss, 2 soldiers block their path. With no time to waste, the fight begins. The comrades charge, but within moments, they're dispatched. More arrive, only to meet the same fate. One by one, Hank J and Corporal Lee clear their path. Finally, they stand at the brink of hell itself. Hank J's expression darkens. "Lee!" Corporal Lee straightens, nodding. "I'm ready." They lay out sacred papers along the gate's edge, forming an intricate seal. Hank J kneels, chanting the incantations, but before he can finish, a shadow looms overhead. Park Min-cheol. Without hesitation, Min-cheol strikes, sending Corporal Lee plunging toward the abyss. In a flash, Hank J leaps in after him, catching him mid-fall. With a powerful heave, he throws Corporal Lee back onto solid ground. Corporal Lee scrambles to his feet, horror etched on his face as Hank J plummets toward the void. Then, suddenly, Hank J stops mid-air. Glowing with an almost divine radiance, he invokes his special spell, Endure. Suspended in the air, he burns so brightly that Min-cheol is momentarily blinded. Corporal Lee seizes the opportunity, attacking with everything he has. Min-cheol barely flinches. Instead, he smirks. "You've improved." "Shut up, bastard," Corporal Lee spits. Min-cheol's amusement fades. With a monstrous roar, he retaliates, hurling Corporal Lee across the battlefield with inhuman force. The impact leaves him battered, barely able to move. For the first time, a chilling realization settles over him. Park Min-cheol is no longer a man. Forcing himself back onto his feet, Corporal Lee steels his resolve, but as he looks up, his breath catches. Min Cheol's transformation is complete. Massive black wings unfurl from his back, his left eye now completely consumed by a jagged devil's horn. The horn pulses with energy, and within its darkness, his eye has turned into a glowing crimson beacon. He wields only a dagger, yet the force behind his strikes is monstrous. With no other choice, Corporal Lee charges. Min Cheol meets him head-on. Their weapons clash, ringing out like thunder. The sheer force of their blows shakes the air between them. This time, Min Cheol prevails again, sending Corporal Lee skidding backward. But the fight is only making him angrier. His rage fuels his strength, his aura growing more intense. Yet, with each passing moment, Min Cheol's demonic presence strengthens as well. The battle tilts further into madness. Then, an opportunity. As Min Cheol revels in his own power, Corporal Lee lunges forward, blade aimed to strike. But Min Cheol simply catches the sword with his bare hand, stopping the attack as if it were nothing. He smirks. "Give up. You will never defeat me." Through sheer will, Corporal Lee grits his teeth. Not happening. Irritated, Min Cheol wrenches the sword from him and flings both the weapon and its wielder into a nearby wall. The impact is bone-rattling, the wall cracking from the sheer force. Blood spills freely from Corporal Lee's wounds. His body screams at him to stay down, but he refuses. The battlefield is now a chaotic inferno. Buildings crumble. Monsters rampage unchecked. He can't fight all of this alone. He needs more power. And then, a thought strikes him. Life and death are intertwined. If one seeks to live, he will die. If one is prepared to die, he will live. He repeats the words under his breath, focusing. As he kneels, supporting himself with his sword, his blood pools beneath him. He is giving everything, his strength, his soul, to break his limits. Then, the transformation begins. A sharp blue light engulfs him, his aura expanding beyond its former boundaries. On the other side of the battlefield, Hankjae floats above the gate to hell, his ritual reaching its climax. The air around him vibrates with an overwhelming force. Yet, he is utterly oblivious to the war raging beyond his focus. Corporal Lee rises, his aura crackling with newfound power. Min Cheol watches, intrigued. Then, their eyes lock. Corporal Lee's right eye, now glowing with an electric blue radiance, pierces through the darkness. He moves. In a blur, he appears before Min Cheol, sword aimed to strike. The impact sends a shockwave through the battlefield, forcing Min Cheol back. Even he looks momentarily stunned. Corporal Lee himself has no idea where this strength is coming from. Min Cheol's expression darkens. "Enough games. Time to put you down." Roaring, he launches forward, his dagger slicing through the air. "Arrogant bastard!" Corporal Lee meets him head-on. Their weapons clash, sending sparks flying. This time, it's Corporal Lee who gains the upper hand, pushing Min Cheol back. He grins. How does it feel, getting beaten by a South Korean brat? Min Cheol's fury explodes. He is about to retaliate when a massive explosion erupts. Both warriors are flung into the air. They turn their gazes toward the source, the gate to hell itself. The explosion blinds them, a piercing white light tearing through the battlefield. Min Cheol's stomach twists in dread. Has Hankjae finished the ritual? Then, a monstrous roar shakes the earth. A dragon emerges from the abyss, a beast so massive it could reduce a city to rubble in minutes. Its fangs gleam like swords, its tail whips violently, and its wings stretch wide enough to blot out the sky. The sound it emits is more horrifying than any Mandrako's shriek. Min Cheol's eyes widen. Sweat beads on his forehead. "Send the signal! Now!" The gate's explosion casts his shadow across the battlefield, but as the dust settles, his shadow is no longer human. A massive, monstrous figure looms, a hulking, horned entity with blazing red eyes. It looks like a demon. It looks like the true form of Park Min Cheol himself. Then, as quickly as it appeared, the shadow is absorbed back into him. Min Cheol turns, his gaze burning with wrath. Standing before him, unshaken, is Corporal Lee. Min Cheol growls, his voice deeper, more bestial. "I'll make sure you and that old bastard Hank J don't die peacefully." But Corporal Lee does not flinch. His stance is steady, his resolve unwavering. For the first time, he is not afraid. Min Cheol lunges at him. Meanwhile, deep within the control room, North Korean officers frantically pull a lever. Machines activate at the gate's edges, releasing a glowing purple liquid straight into the abyss. The reaction is instant. Hank J winces as pain rips through him. The agony is unbearable, yet he remains steadfast, his sweat dripping onto the golden talisman clutched in his hand. The moment the sweat touches it, the talisman flares brighter than before. The sky erupts with monsters. Countless winged beasts flood the heavens, blotting out the stars. From the depths of hell, human-like hands claw at the earth, trying to escape their eternal prison. Min Cheol and Corporal Lee, still locked in combat, are momentarily frozen by the sight. For the first time, Min Cheol's confidence wavers. His eyes dart between the swarming creatures and the chaos unfolding around him. He is too late. His comrades realize it too. Orders change. "Forget fighting. Dodge the monsters. That's our only chance." Seeing the shift, Corporal Lee bolts toward the gate, desperate to reach Hank J. When he arrives, he stands in awe. The battlefield is in ruin. The gate is shattered. And Hank J, glowing with a power beyond comprehension, stands alone amidst the destruction. Corporal Lee barely has time to process it before a monstrous presence looms behind Hank J. His heart lurches. "Hank J, behind you!" The battle between the North Korean army and two South Korean warriors has reached its final stage. The gate to hell has been obliterated, unleashing every horror it once held. The North Korean base lies in ruins, its soldiers desperately trying to fend off the monstrous horde now overwhelming them. But the creatures are too many, too powerful. Chaos reigns supreme. Meanwhile, Hank J teeters on the brink of death. He poured every last ounce of his strength into sealing the gate, and now his body is failing him. But an even greater danger looms behind him. Corporal Lee Se-min, having barely survived his fight with Park Min Cheol, arrives just in time to witness the unfolding horror. Lying at the edge of the ruined battlefield, he watches Hank J, admiration flickering in his weary gaze. Then, his eyes widen in alarm. A new enemy has emerged, a terrifying humanoid creature, its body clad in a form-fitting black metallic suit. Enormous bat-like wings stretch from its back, and a mask adorned with curved horns and a glowing emerald obscures its face. Before Hank J can react, the creature strikes. Its clawed hand pierces straight through Hank J's chest, emerging from the other side in a grotesque display of power. Blood spills freely, Hank J's body going limp. His complexion pales, his limbs trembling as the strength leaves him. A thick, eerie mist swirls around him, suffocating the air with its unnatural energy. Corporal Lee cannot stand idly by. Fueled by fury, he rushes forward. But before he can reach Hank J, Park Min Cheol intercepts, mistaking his movement for an escape attempt. Min Cheol surges toward him, but Corporal Lee meets his charge with an enraged glare, his shining blue eyes brimming with power. With a mighty swing of his sword, he forces Mincheol back, the impact sending shockwaves through the battlefield. Without hesitation, he sprints toward Hankjae. Through ragged breaths, Hankjae's voice barely reaches him. "Don't! Come closer! Run!" The words cut deeper than any blade. Corporal Lee's chest tightens as tears prick his eyes. He understands immediately. This is a farewell. His mind spirals back into memory, running through the moments that defined him. The days spent glued to his computer screen, overweight and hopeless. The time he embraced a dragon, feeling its warmth. The countless times he turned and ran, choosing survival over courage. But he is not that man anymore. Without another thought, Corporal Lee launches himself toward the monster that struck Hankjae down. His sword finds its mark, slicing through its cursed flesh. The creature screeches in agony before vanishing into a mist of darkness. But just as victory seems within reach, Corporal Lee is pulled into a strange new reality. A world of absolute darkness. He reaches out, but there is nothing. No sound, no sensation, just endless void. Panic flutters in his chest. Has his aura vanished? Is he lost? He refuses to succumb. Gritting his teeth, he swings his sword, tearing through the oppressive blackness. A crack forms, spilling forth a ray of light. Beyond the fracture, a lone figure stands with his back turned. Corporal Lee takes a step toward him, but the world shifts violently beneath his feet. He tumbles, falling through time and space, past a city, a forest, snowy mountains, and into the boundless cosmos. Then, everything goes still. He floats in the vast expanse, earth looming beneath him. A voice calls to him. "You fool!" His eyes snap open. There, drifting in the void, is Hankjae, his presence unwavering despite the infinite nothingness. He raises his hand, summoning a radiant light. The glow intensifies, filling the abyss with warmth. "Live!" Hankjae commands. The light engulfs Corporal Lee, propelling him downward. He awakens with a gasp. The ground is solid beneath him, but something is wrong. Twin moons hang in the sky. Strange, twisted plants sprout from the unfamiliar earth. A thick purple mist curls around him, and behind him, a monstrous presence. Slowly, he turns. A towering reptilian creature stands before him. Its four glowing eyes pierce the darkness, its thick purple hide glistening. 6 insect-like legs shift ominously, and a long, forked tongue flicks out, tasting the air. The beast is unlike anything he has ever faced. Yet, instead of fear, a slow smile spreads across Corporal Lee's face. He is somewhere new, somewhere unknown. And this is just the beginning. 3 years later. In the bustling city, a young man named Jae Young steps into the headquarters of SH Company, a small-scale raid staffing agency. With neatly styled brown hair, a lean physique, and sharp features, he looks like a professional. That is, until one notices his odd choice of attire. A long, casual green jacket draped over formal office wear, complete with a loosely knotted tie. His colleague eyes him with amusement. "Here early again?" Jae Young shrugs. "Habit. Helps me prepare." He takes his seat, listening as his coworker complains about the overwhelming workload. "Technology's advanced too much. Now we barely get a break." Jae Young listens silently, sipping his cold coffee. The conversation drifts to quitting, but he waves off the idea without hesitation. At the morning briefing, the team discusses a newly detected gate precursor in Anyang. A female colleague presents a map marking the expected locations of the gate. According to the prediction report, blue mark raiders should be sufficient. Nearby, 2 blue raiders chat about promotions. "I'm upgrading to green next month," one brags. The other whistles. Damn. You learned your aura method at Muguk Society, right? That place is no joke. Jae-young remains focused, listening carefully. Raiders today are no longer terrified of gates. With advanced gate prediction technology, accidents have plummeted. Now, preparing for a raid is as simple as selecting an assignment within one's level. Raiders are categorized into 5 groups. Blue, the lowest rank. Green, one step above. Gold, a prestigious tier. Platinum, elite professionals. Black, the best of the best. As the meeting concludes, the female colleague turns to Jae-young. Since you have the most experience, would you like to lead this raid? Jae-young stiffens. The opportunity is enormous, and his heart pounds at the thought. Before he can accept, a group of blue raiders sneers. Seriously? What's the point of experience if you're still stuck at blue rank? One jeers. Exactly, another chimes in. Why hand such an important job to a low-rank nobody? Jae-young clenches his jaw, but says nothing. He simply meets their mocking gazes with quiet determination. He doesn't need their validation, because true raiders aren't defined by rank. They're defined by their will to fight.